there are numbers of technological controls, because when we are dealing with the cybersecurity related risk, then technological related controls play a major role to tackle those risks. Because when we are talking about the risk related to hackers, how the hackers penetrate in our system, and how the hackers, you can say, take the advantage of the vulnerabilities which we do have within our system. So all those controls can be prevented by implementing the technological controls. So we have seen physical security related control, we have seen people related control, we have seen also the organizational related controls. Now we are going to discuss the technological related control. So we have already identified the risk related to technological related controls, that risk may be related to the hackers who are trying to penetrate in our systems due to vulnerability in our system. So there may be lots of vulnerability in the system. For that, we are trying to implement the controls we are trying to implement within our system. We need to first try to identify a proper technical architecture. What would be our proper technical architecture? How we are going to, you can say, control our endpoint devices. So and what would be our network architecture, where we need to place our firewall? What is IPS, intrusion prevention system, and what is IDS, intrusion detection system, and how we are going to segregate our network. So all these play a very important role. You can say key roles. You can say technical related controls play a very key role to protect our informations. So first we need to see what would be the proper network architecture. Suppose something is coming from the outside, something is coming from the internet, to our network. Then the first line of defense would be the firewall. The firewall would be our organizational first line of defense. After the firewall, we can place IPS or IDS. Now, after IPS and IDS, we can have our network structures. We can have various switches or router. We can have the switches. Through switches, we can have multiple VLAN. We can have multiple segregated devices. Like suppose one device would be there, another devices would be there. Lots of devices would be connected. So we should have various connected devices through the switch by having the VLAN architecture. So this would be our proper line of the defense. So we will see in detail what actually the firewall do, what actually the IPS and IDS systems do, how the switches are being configured, how the VLANs have been created, how the VLANs are created to segregate the network, so that if one of the functions within your organization is infected, it may not affect another domains. So this would be our proper architectures, how we need to design these architecture. But while designing these architectures, there are several numbers of technological related controls we need to put, like privilege access rights, how we are going to provide the access to the networks, your capacity managements of your network, how we are going to protect ourselves against the malware, how we are going to manage the technical vulnerability, we are going to see in the details. So this would be our overall network structure, you can say. This would be the network structure. Now, the first control in the technological control is your user endpoint devices. So first we need to identify all user endpoint devices. What would be the endpoint devices? The first thing, identification of the endpoint devices. What is our endpoint devices? Then we need to have what types of information we do have, what are the classifications level of the endpoint devices are, how the critical data is being processed or stored in our endpoint devices. This would be the first thing, identification of the endpoint devices. Another thing would be the registration of the endpoint devices. We need to have a proper registration process within the organization. How we are going to register the endpoint devices, how we are going to allocate those endpoint devices to the users. What would be the requirement of physical protection? Suppose you have given an endpoint device, a laptop or server laptop is your endpoint devices. Now, what would be the physical protection? What is the physical controls measures the users have to take to protect those endpoint devices? This would be the first thing. Second thing, the another thing is there a restriction on the software installation. You should have a control within the endpoint devices so that any users may not, you can say, I may not able to install any software without the permission of the IT people, because every software may not be legitimate one. Some software, the freely downloaded software from the internet, may contain some, you can say, vulnerability. Yeah, they can create some vulnerability within your system. So we should stop, we should restrict so that user may not able to install the software. We should configure the rule that how our endpoint devices is going to connect in the public networks or the network off premises. This is the major control when the people are working from the home, because the network, the connections from where the users are connecting to the system may not be, you can say, you may not be aware about the network, what kinds of networks the persons are using. So in that case, we should have a proper VPN solution. VPN solution we can take. We should have a proper VPN solution so that your system may be, your network identified the legitimate source from where the connections are coming. So we can have the VPN installed. Next control is the access controls. How you are going to provide in the access controls, how you are going to provide the access to the user, the process of providing the access to the user, how we are going to authenticate the user, that the same users are coming, asking to request, asking for using our servers. Access control should be properly identified. Proper authentication and authorization mechanism should be there. How you are going to authenticate the user in the access control. We can have the MFA also, multi-factor authentication. We can use single sign-on SSO. MFA we can use. We can use single sign-on features also. SSO also we can implement. The next control would be the storage encryption. Storage device encryption. Your storage device should be properly encrypted, so that in case if your data has been lost or stolen, the data may not be used of anyone. So your device, you can use the BitLocker encryption in the Windows devices. All the devices should be encrypted. In the Windows server also, we can encrypt by using the various tools and software. So next control is the protection against the malware. For protection against the malware, we can use the proper antivirus measures. We can install the antivirus within our server. We can install antivirus within our devices. And remote disabling, deletion, or lockout. Lockout features should be there. If suppose some for a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, if you are idle, your laptop or desktop is in idle situation, then it should be lock automatically. And remote disabling should be there. You cannot access your system from the remotely, and the deletion features also should be there. Backups, we should plan the proper backups, how often we need to take backup, how the backups would be tested, all those things should be there. The use of removable devices like your memory devices, most should be blocked. Your USB port should be blocked so that user may not able to plug any USB, or you can say the storage devices should not be plugged, because this may be a risk of data leakage, and this may be also a risk of you can say to expose towards the vulnerability. Some kinds of unlegitimate software may be installed within your system, which can expose your system in front of the hackers. Use of partitioning capability. We need to use the partitioning capability in case of organization information or associated assets and other information may be properly segregated. So this would be proper controls. And another now some of the responsibility related to users may be there, like you have placed all of the control, but some of the responsibilities should come from the users also. When users are not using the system, they should lock their systems. They should protect their endpoint devices from unauthorized use. If the users should not use their devices from the you can say public related Wi-Fi connections. They should physically protect their devices. They should so these kinds of things should come from the user side. Now another controls is the use of personal devices, the BYOD. The use of personal devices is that bring your own devices. So normally the organization should not encourage to use the BYOD, but in some cases, if you are using the BYOD application, if you are using the BYOD things, then in that case it should be properly authorized, properly approved, and you should have a proper controls. Now let's talk about your email related things. You are also configuring your email on your personal mobile phones. So there should be a proper controls when you are using anything from your personal mobile phones. A proper control should be there. When something is accessed from your personal mobile phones, then a proper control should be there. We can
tap shutter button to serve.
We can take use of various, you can say, applications which are available, that are paid application, which can be installed within your devices, so that only authorized persons can use your BYOD devices. So normally it should not be encouraged, but if it is need based, it should be authorized by someone. Now another control is your privilege access rights. Sometimes, what is the privilege access rights? Privilege access, you can say, enhanced rights. Sometimes you have given admin rights. Sometimes you have given a deletion rights, that is called as the privilege access right. A proper process should be identified within the organization. So the first thing, we need to identify the user who are having the privilege access rights. Then we need to see whether those privilege access rights are required to the users. A proper authorization mechanism should be there within the organization. If anyone have the privilege access right, a proper authentication mechanism should be there if someone are using the privilege access rights, and those privilege access rights should be properly logged, and those logs should be properly reviewed. So these are the process for the privilege access rights. So there should be a proper process within the organization, and all logs should be recorded, and those logs should be regularly reviewed. Suppose I want a privilege access rights. In that case, what I will do, I will need to request the boss, I need a privilege access right for this much time period, and those access rights should be authorized from my manager. Okay, and once it is authorized by manager, then for the time period, the privilege access right would be given to me with proper justifications why it is required to me. So there should be a proper mechanism to having the privilege access rights. Now another control is your information access restrictions. There should be a proper information access restriction within the organization, that who are going to access which kinds of information. The sensitive information may not be accessed by the each and every person within the organization. We need to have a proper dynamic access management. If someone are accessing anything, this should be properly authorized. The access restriction should be there. Encryption mechanism, we need to have a proper encryption mechanism should be there. Now, another control is that access to the source code. When we are or when our organization is developing the softwares, then a proper control should be there who are going to access the source code, because the source code is a very critical thing. Each and every persons in the organization may not given a proper is not given control over the source code. Some designated person should be given the access to the source code with proper justification. A role-based access should be there. So we need to have a proper access control mechanism within the organization for granting the source code. Secure authentication, it is the same one. In the secure authentication, a proper authentication mechanism should be there. How the system is going to authenticate the users. It is recommended go for a multi-factor authentication. Secure login process should be there. And all the logs should be reviewed properly. Now the next clause is your capacity management. In the capacity management, we should do the proper capacity management. The capacity management could be done for the, you can say, your human resources, your technical resources. All the resources comes under the part of your capacity management. And the capacity management, suppose you don't have a proper staff to monitor the thing, in that case you will go for the hiring process. You don't have a proper system for that, you will go for you can say, if suppose your RAM utilization, if your laptop's RAM is not capable enough to perform, or it is underperforming, in that case your laptop RAM should be changed. So this is the proper capacity management. The capacity management, you should check utilizations of your servers, utilizations of the RAM, utilizations of the CPU, and if it is going beyond that, in that case you need to enhance the capacity. This comes under the capacity management. Properly if you are talking about the, you can say, your disk related space, in that case your deletion of the obsolete data, those data which is not required, you can delete from your servers, you can delete from your laptops, and these things. Hard you can disposal of hard copy records, optimization batches process and schedules, optimization application, denying or restriction bandwidth. So these kinds of the things should be there in the capacity management. The next clause is your protection against the malware. In the protection against malware, we should have a proper antivirus should be installed within our system to reduce the vulnerability that can be exploited by the malwares. The antivirus definition should be automatically updated. A proper control should be there, because the antivirus systems are also releasing patch on timely basis. So your definitions, antivirus definitions should be timely updated. It should be not timely, it should be automatically updated. So this should be your one of the controls. Now next control is the management of the technical vulnerability. In the management of technical vulnerability, so first thing is to identify the technical vulnerability. For identifying the technical vulnerability, we should have a proper system in the place. We should have proper tools in the place to identify the vulnerability. We can have proper proper tools within the organization that identify the vulnerability in the system. For that, like Nessus, we have identified the vulnerability by, we have seen earlier also. We have seen for identifying the vulnerability, we are using Nessus. In same case, there are numbers of softwares are available to identify the technical vulnerability. If those softwares are not available within the organization, we can take the help of third party who is you can say providing these kinds of vulnerability assessment or PT types of services. So this would be your identification of technical vulnerability. Proper identification process would be there. How often we are going to identify the vulnerability, what would be our process to close those vulnerability, and how then after closing those vulnerability, how we are going to reassess those vulnerabilities, whether the vulnerability has been closed or not. So next control is the configuration management. Now we need to understand what actually the configuration management. There are two things are there: change management and the configuration management. Change management and the configuration management. Two things are there. In the change management, we are controlling each and every changes within the organization. The change should be reviewed, change should be properly approved. There should be proper callback. You can say recall mechanism should be there if the changes has not been performed as we have expected. But in the configuration management, we need to identify the configuration items, what are our CI, and we are going to track all the changes throughout the asset life cycle. What are the changes has been happened to the assets in their lifetime span. So we need to understand the difference between change management and the configuration management. The configuration management, we need to first identify what are our CI, what are our configuration items. Based on identifications of the CI, we need to track all the changes which has been happened to the assets in its lifetime. So first, in the configuration management, we need to identify the CI. What are the configuration items are there? How and what are the changes has been there across the lifetimes of the across the lifespan of the, you can say, assets. So your configuration management can be integrated with asset management, so the tracking may be properly. You can track the changes. Information deletion. How often we are going to delete the information? Who are the persons? Because sometimes information deletion would be the legal rights. Okay, suppose as per the GDPR related norms, as per the privacy related norms, when and as per also customer contractual contracts, you need to erase or delete the data from your servers. If your customer don't want that you to capture all the data, then you need to delete those data. So there should be some legal or statutory requirement or the contractual requirement to delete the data. There should be a proper process within the organization that how to delete those data, how to delete the obsolete data. So there should be a proper approval should be taken while deleting the data. So there should be a proper mechanism within the organization to delete those data. The next clause is your data masking. So this data masking should be as per your accordance with your organizational, you can say, a data categorization policy. If something is very critical or something is very sensitive, or we are having the personally identifiable information within our system, the data should be properly masked. We can use the encryption techniques We can use nulling or deleting characters to prevent unauthorized user from seeing the full messages. We can have proper varying numbers and dates. We can have the proper substitutionals to hide the sensitive data. We can have proper replacing value with their hashes. These kinds of some controls we can implement to mask the data. Now, next control is our data leakage prevention. This is the DLP. We should have proper data leakage prevention control within the organization. You can take the help of third party who is providing the DLP. So we need to identify what are the personal data we do have, what are the sensitive information we do have. Based on that, we need to identify the channels of the data leakage. The channels of the data leakage are your emails, your official emails, your file transfers, your mobile devices, your portable devices. These are the certain channels for the data leakage. We need to have a proper data leakage prevention system within our system, so that we should have, first thing would be the control. We do have proper control so that no data should be sent outside from the organization. Now, another control would be there. If it is sent, then we do have a proper logs that who is the person who have sent any data outside the organization. That's why we need to have implement the proper DLP features. Now, information backup. Information backup is not you can say preventive clause. It is the corrective clause. It is a corrective types of controls. When some mishappening would happen with our original data, then in that case we can use the backup data. This is the corrective controls. But a backup process should be there within the organization, because we should take proper backups. Backups of your servers, backups of your firewalls, backup of your data. All the backups should be properly taken. The frequency should be properly identified, and the backup should be properly tested. And the backup tapes or the backup media where you are taking the backup should not be stored on the same premises. It should be at least you can say stored in some another premises, because in case of disaster, or in case of disaster with one of the building where the organization is located, if that building is not functional due to any regions, then it could be accessed from another locations. So that's why backup tapes, backup media should be stored in some another places. So there should be a proper backup management should be there. Now, redundancy of information processing facility. So we should implement a proper redundancy sufficient to meet the availability of the requirement. So here we should have a proper business continuity plan. We should have proper business continuity plan for that. We should have proper redundant network. We should have two geographically separated data centers that are mirrored systems. We can have proper physically redundant power supply, because sometimes power supplies are also not there. So proper business continuity planning, we need to do the proper business continuity planning for that. In case of our one of the servers are not working, or in case our one of the premises is not working, so we may able to use these things from some other location. This could be our DR site, you can say disaster recovery sites. Now, next control is your logging. Logging is the same controls. Each and every logs that has been generated with, first thing is that the log should be generated. When anyone is trying to access the system, the log should be generated. And those logs should be properly stored and protected, and the log should be properly analyzed. If something has happened, if someone is trying to access your system, in that case also log should be generated. Logs should be generated, and those logs should be properly stored, and that log should be properly protected so that anyone cannot use those logs. And those logs should be properly analyzed, that who is trying to access your systems. So we should have proper successful and rejected system related logs, successful and rejected data or other resource access attempts, change to the system configuration, use of privilege. If the some persons are using their privilege rights, those logs also should be generated. Alarms raised by the access control system. If you are, it is, we are not talking about the, you can say the technical controls also, we are talking about some logs related to physical security also. If you have implemented some certain access control within your system, a physical access control, there also logs should be generated. Some unauthorized person is trying to access the thing, a proper alarm should be there. If suppose in your data center, some unauthorized person is trying to access the system, a proper alarm should be there. So log should be captured, and log should be properly, you can say, monitored on time to timely basis. Now, monitoring activities, we need to have our network, our system, or our application should be monitored for anomalous behavior, or you can say inappropriate behavior. If some inappropriate things are there, then we should have proper monitoring activities should be there. For this, we can use SIM based, any SIM based tools, SIEM based tools we can use. SIEM based tools we can use to monitor the inappropriate behavior of the users. Next control is the clock synchronization. The clock synchronization is also one of the detective controls. And clock means the timings, you can say here the timings are there. So each and every system which is connected to a network, all the clocks should be same, because there are certain legal and you can say contractual requirements should be there. That's why the clock should be properly synchronized. Next control is your installation of the software on operational systems. This we have seen that the user should not able to install any of the systems within their devices. Now, next thing is the network security. In the network security, we have seen that the first line of defense should be firewall. So the first thing is that we should have proper firewall in the system. Firewall should be installed within the system. The proper, you can say, IPS and IDS related system should be installed. The proper segregation of the network should be there, so that if one of the networks has been infected, another network should not be there. The segregation of network can be done by the VLAN mechanism. We need to implement the VLAN mechanism, or we can segregate the networks, or we can have proper, you can say, routing features within the system to segregate our networks. Segregation is very important. We should segregate the network. Now, next control is our web filtering. What is the web filtering? In the web filtering, the user are not supposed to use each and every websites, because if we are going to use unauthorized web resources, then our system may be compromised by the malware. So web filtering should be there. The malicious website should be properly blocked. Your website sharing the illegal content should be blocked. So this would be a proper control related to the web filtering. 90% of the attack, we should remember the 90% of attacks initiate or originate from the internal weakness or internal vulnerability, or you can say from the user's carelessness. So we should also control the user related things. The next control is the cryptography. Cryptography is the controls where all your data, the data which are in the rest, the data which are in the motion should be properly, you can say, encrypted. The encryption mechanism should be there, and a proper encryption mechanism we should have. Next control is the secure development life cycle. This controls the preventive control. This control is applicable for those organizations who is developing the software. A proper secure development life cycle model should be there while developing any tools or any software within the organization. A proper security checkpoint should be there. A proper security, you can say, security requirement should be identified, because software developing, the persons are able to develop their software, but the security parameters should be there. Your development, testing, and the production environment should be different one. Guidance on the security in the software development life cycle should be there. A proper software development methodology should be there. Secure development guidelines should be there. Your security checkpoints in the projects should be there. Security version control should be there. The testing is very important. Software should be properly tested. A secure development life cycle model should be properly adopted. The next control is your application security requirement. In the application security requirement, all your applications should be properly secured. Your transactional service applications where you are doing the transactions should be properly secure. The proper encryption mechanism should be there. Proper, if you are taking any electronic ordering or payment system, so properly we need to ensure the confidentiality and the integrity of the things. For that reason, we should have proper trusted source or trusted authority should be identified. So when we are having the payment, when we are collecting any payment, then in that case, our payment should be PCI DSS compliant. So all the controls which are should be implemented, PCI BSS related controls should be. The payment facilitating process should be compliant with PCI. Next control is your secure coding. It is a part of your software development life cycle. A proper secure coding should be there so that if a user are using any code, so there should not be any malicious code should be there, so that any information may be transferred. You can say any information may be leaked by using that code. That's why security testing should be there. Why, before deploying any system in the production environment, a proper security testing should be there. Now, next clause is your outsourced development. If you are not doing any development within the organization and you have outsourced that development features, development function to some other organization, in that case, there should be a proper acceptance testing and the quality criteria should be properly identified, and the code ownership should be properly identified. Right to audit should be there. Intellectual property related clause or rights should be properly identified, that who is the owner of the code. And the most important part is the security testing. It is the same. Your development testing and production environment should be separated. So all your production testing and things should be properly segregated. Now next cause is your change management. All the changes should be in the change management. All the changes what is being happening within your system should be properly planned. It should be authorized by someone. It should be communicated to the interested parties. All the changes should be tested for their acceptance. We should have proper change management record. We should have proper documentation for that, and a proper rollback plan should be there. When the changes are not happening, in that case we can roll back the things. If the desired outcomes had not been achieved, in that case a proper rollback plan should be there. So these are the some technical controls, so which should be there. The next control is your protection of information security during audit testing. When you are doing any audit testing, audit test and other assurance activities, when we are doing in the operational systems, this should be planned, this should be properly agreed between tester and the appropriate teams, so that we could have minimize the audit impact. And those audit logs, when you are doing audit, then audit logs should be properly protected, because when you are doing any audit, then there may be chances that some of the vulnerabilities should be identified. If those vulnerabilities would go in the wrong hands, then there may be a chance that your system may be exploited. So these are the technical controls which we can implement within the organization to safeguard our critical data or the critical assets. So that's all. That's all the technical controls.